For today's lesson, we will discuss the mechanisms of evolution. The mechanisms of evolution are very important since they explain where we come from, along with other things like birds, turtles, and even flowers. There are 5 key mechanisms that cause a population to exhibit change in allele frequency from one generation to the next. They are natural selection, gene flow, genetic drift, mutation, and non-random mating. With that being said, let's get into what all this means and does. Natural selection affects variation in a population as the better adapted, which means more fit, individuals to their environment survive and reproduce, passing on their genes to successive generations, increasing the frequency of favorable alleles in the population. Nature basically selects which organisms will be successful. Imagine that green beetles are easier for birds to spot and eat. Brown beetles are a little more likely to survive to produce offspring. They pass their genes for brown coloration onto their offspring, so in the next generation, brown beetles are more common than in the previous generation. There are 4 steps of natural selection. 1. In nature, more offspring are produced than can survive. 2. In any population, individuals have variation. 3. Individuals with advantageous variation survive and pass on their variations to the next generation. And finally, over time, offspring with a certain advantageous variations make up most of the population. Gene flow is the movement of alleles into or out of a population. It's called immigration or emigration. Gene flow can introduce new alleles into a gene pool or can change allele frequencies. The overall effect of gene flow is to counteract natural selection by creating less differences between populations. An example is plant pollen being blown into a new area. Some individuals from a population of brown beetles might have joined a population of green beetles. That would make the genes for brown beetles more frequent in the green beetle population. Gene flow is what happens when 2 or more populations interbreed. This genuinely increases genetic diversity. Imagine 2 populations of squirrels on opposite sides of a river. The squirrels on the west side have bushier tails than those on the east side, as a result of 3 different genes that code for tail bushiness. If a tree falls over the river and a squirrel is able to scamper across it to mate with the other population, gene flow occurs. The next generation of squirrels on the east side may have more bushy tails than those in the previous generation, and west side squirrels might have fewer bushy tails. The change in allele frequencies is a result of chance processes. These changes are much more pronounced in small populations. They are directly related to the population numbers. Smaller population sizes are more susceptible to genetic drift than larger populations because there is a greater chance that a rare allele will be lost. Imagine that in one generation, 2 brown beetles happen to have 4 offspring survive to reproduce. Several green beetles were killed when someone stepped on them and had no offspring. The next generation would have few more brown beetles than the previous generation, but just by chance. These chance changes from generation to generation are known as genetic drift. 2 examples of genetic drift are the founder effect and the population bottleneck. A founder effect occurs when a new colony is started by a few members of the original population. Small population that branches off from a larger one may or may not be genetically representative of the larger population from which it was derived. Only a fraction of the total genetic diversity of the original gene pool is represented in these few individuals. Population bottleneck occurs when a population undergoes an event in which a significant percentage of the population or species is killed or otherwise prevented from reproducing. The event may eliminate alleles entirely or also cause other alleles to be overrepresented in a gene pool. The event could be any kind of event that reduces the population, like floods or diseases. Mutations are inheritable changes in a genotype. Mutations provide the variation and raw material that can be acted upon by natural selection. It is the only source of additional genetic material and new alleles. They can be neutral, harmful, or beneficial. And one form of mutation is antibiotic resistance in bacteria. Mutation is a change in the hereditary material of life, which is DNA. An organism's DNA affects how it looks, how it behaves, and its physiology. So a change in an organism's DNA can cause changes in all aspects of its life. Somatic mutations occur in non-reproductive cells and won't be passed on to offspring. For example, say a yellow and red apple. The golden color would be caused by somatic mutation. The seeds of the apple would not carry the mutation. The only mutations that matter to large-scale evolution are those that can be passed to offspring. These occur in reproductive cells like eggs and sperm, called germline mutations. Mutations could happen when DNA fails to copy accurately. External influences can create mutations. They can also be caused by exposure to specific chemicals or radiation. In animals, non-random mating can change allele frequencies, as the choice of mates is often an important part of behavior. Many plants self-pollinate, which is also a form of non-random mating. Sexual reproduction results in variations of traits in offspring as a result of crossing over and meiosis and mutations. Genetic shuffling is a source of variation. Sexual selection occurs when certain traits increase mating success. There are two types of sexual selection. Intra-sexual selection is competition amongst males. Inter-sexual selection is when males display certain traits to females. Your assignment due tomorrow is attached on the next slide. Access it from my website. Please fill out the table provided by telling the benefits of each of the animal adaptations. To be dismissed from class, please answer the question on the board and hand it to me on your way out. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.